Jake Morrison sat in the big chair at the human table and watched the alien beings talk about his people like they were monsters. The council chamber was huge and filled with hundreds of different species from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant bugs, others were made of what seemed like living crystal, and a few floated in tanks of strange liquid. They all had one thing in common, though. They did not like humans very much. The Veltar representative was speaking now. She looked like a giant lizard wearing fancy robes, and her voice made a hissing sound when she talked. "The humans keep breaking our rules," she said to the crowd. "They go where they should not go, and they fight when they should talk. They are too violent for our peaceful galaxy." Morrison had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 15 years. He had heard these same words so many times that he could say them himself. The aliens always complained about human actions, but they never wanted to hear about why humans did what they did. They just saw the fighting and decided that humans were bad. Amy Carter sat next to Morrison and shifted in her chair. She was young and still believed that maybe someday the aliens would understand humans better. Morrison used to think that way too, but not anymore. The lieutenant had only been working with the council for 2 years, and she still got upset when the aliens said mean things about Earth. "Ambassador," she whispered to Morrison, "should we respond to these charges?" Morrison shook his head slightly. There was no point in defending human actions anymore. He had tried for 15 years to explain why humans fought pirates and saved people from disasters. The aliens never listened. They just saw explosions and dead ships and decided that humans were the problem. The worst part was that humans had saved so many of these alien species over the years. When the Rigel system was attacked by space raiders, human ships had arrived first and fought them off. When a plague hit the Centauri colonies, human doctors had worked day and night to find a cure. When pirates took over the trade routes near Vega, human patrol ships had cleared them out in 3 days, but none of that mattered to the council. They only remembered the violence and forgot about who was saved. Councillor Vexhai stood up to speak next. He was from the Etherian Collective and looked like he was made of blue glass. His people were very proud of being peaceful, and they thought violence was the worst thing in the universe. "The humans destroyed 17 ships last week," he said. In his bell-like voice, "They left 3 colonies in ruins. This is what humans always do. They destroy everything they touch." Morrison felt something break inside his chest. Those 17 ships had been pirate vessels holding 2 million innocent people hostage. The 3 colonies were already burning when the human fleet arrived. The pirates had been killing everyone they could find and taking everything of value. Human marines had fought building by building to save whoever was still alive, but Vexhai only saw the numbers. 17 ships destroyed, 3 colonies damaged. He did not care that those ships were full of criminals or that the colonies would have been completely destroyed if humans had not shown up. Morrison stood up slowly. The chamber got quiet because humans rarely spoke during these sessions anymore. For years, Morrison had tried to explain and defend and justify every human action. He was tired of it now. "You are right," Morrison said in a calm voice that carried across the huge chamber. "Those 17 ships were destroyed. They were pirate ships holding 2 million people prisoner. The 3 colonies were burning before we got there. We saved everyone we could find." Vexhai made a sound like breaking glass. "But at what cost? Your people only know how to fight and kill. You understand nothing about peace or talking things through." Morrison looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked afraid, others looked angry, and a few looked disgusted. He had seen these same expressions for 15 years. Nothing had changed, and nothing would change. "Maybe you are right," Morrison said quietly. "Maybe we do not belong here with you." The human ambassador picked up his papers and walked toward the exit. Amy Carter followed him, looking confused and worried. The other humans at the table got up and left too. Behind them, the aliens started talking all at once, their voices mixing together in a sound like a storm. Morrison did not look back as he walked out of the council chamber for the last time. In his pocket was a communication device that could send a message to Earth with just one button press. The message was already written and ready to send. It said only 2 words: begin Exodus. The Galactic Council kept talking for hours after the humans left. They argued about whether the humans would come back and what it meant that they had walked out. Some aliens thought it was good that the violent humans were finally gone. Others worried about what would happen without human protection, but none of them really believed that humanity would actually leave the galaxy. Humans had been part of the Council for 50 years. They had colonies on dozens of worlds and trade agreements with hundreds of species. People do not just walk away from 50 years of history. The aliens were wrong about that, just like they had been wrong about humans for so long. Within hours of Morrison's message, every human ship in the galaxy received new orders. The Exodus protocol was beginning, and nothing would ever be the same again. 3 months passed before anyone in the Galactic Council realized that the humans were really gone. At first, most aliens thought the humans were just being dramatic and would come back soon. They had walked out of meetings before when they got angry, though never for this long. But as weeks turned into months, it became clear that something very different was happening. Admiral Lisa Parker stood on the bridge of her ship and watched the last transport vessels leave New Terra. The planet below had been home to 12 million humans for 30 years. Now it was empty. The cities still had power and the farms still had water, but no people lived there anymore. It looked like everyone had just vanished into thin air. All civilians are safely moved to the Andromeda preparation zones, reported Commander Nick Hayes from his station. The planet systems are still running and ready to be handed over to Council authority. Parker nodded but did not feel happy about leaving. New Terra had been beautiful, with blue oceans and green forests that reminded people of Earth. Human families had built lives here, raised children, and created a whole new world. Now they were abandoning it all because a bunch of aliens could not understand that sometimes fighting was necessary to protect innocent people. The Exodus protocol had been created years ago by Earth's government as a backup plan. Nobody really thought it would ever be used, but human leaders were smart enough to prepare for the worst. If humanity was ever forced to leave the known galaxy, they would be ready to survive on their own. All across human space, the same scene was happening. Colonies that had existed for decades were being evacuated in perfect order. Human ships arrived, loaded up everyone and everything important, and left the planets clean and empty. No buildings were destroyed, no systems were damaged. Humans just packed up and disappeared. On Council worlds, people started noticing that something was wrong. The human shipping companies that moved goods between star systems stopped showing up. Medical centers run by human doctors closed their doors without warning. Trade routes that had worked smoothly for years suddenly had problems because human coordinators were gone. Council Speaker Zareth found herself dealing with more and more complaints from member worlds. The Altarian Farming Collective was running out of food because human transport ships had stopped delivering supplies. The Centauri mining operation lost most of their workers when human engineers just vanished overnight. Where did they go? Asked Councillor Thane during an emergency meeting. His people were fish-like beings who lived underwater, and he was very upset because human-built water recycling systems on his homeworld had stopped working when the technicians left. Nobody had good answers. Human colonies were empty but undamaged. Human ships had been seen at the very edge of the galaxy, but they would not respond to messages. Intelligence reports mentioned huge construction projects happening in the dark space between galaxies, but that seemed impossible. Dr. Kelly Roberts was one of the few humans still in Council space. She ran a medical research station that was working on a cure for a disease affecting several alien species. The Council had given her special permission to stay and finish her work, but every day she got messages from desperate aliens asking her to explain what her people were doing. They are not coming back, she told a group of Council representatives who had come to her station. This is not a trick or a way to get better treatment. Humanity is leaving forever. The aliens did not want to believe her. Some species had been mean to humans, but others had tried to be friendly. They could not understand why all humans would leave just because some council members did not like them, but the evidence was getting harder to ignore. Human space was becoming empty of human life. The colonies were still there, but no people lived in them anymore. It was like finding empty houses in a neighborhood where everyone had moved away at the same time. Captain Steve Martinez led one of the last human military groups still in the old galaxy. His job was to make sure no humans had been left behind by accident. What he found in former human territory made him angry and sad at the same time. Pirates were attacking ships in areas where human patrols used to keep them away. The Zarian slavers, who had not been seen for years, were back and taking prisoners from weak planets. Alien criminals were moving into human space because they knew no one would stop them anymore. Council security forces are completely useless. Martinez reported to Admiral Parker over a secret communication channel. It takes them weeks to respond to problems that we used to handle in hours. 3 whole star systems have gone dark and nobody knows what happened to them. Back on the council station, emergency meetings were happening every day. The government of the galaxy was falling apart without human participation. Aliens were starting to realize that humans had been doing a lot more than just fighting and breaking things. They had been keeping the peace, moving supplies, providing medical care, and solving problems that other species did not even know existed. Council Speaker Zareth was trying to hold everything together, but it was like trying to fix a machine when half the parts were missing. The other species did not have the skills or the willingness to do the jobs that humans had been doing quietly for decades. "We need them back," admitted Counselor Vexhai, the same alien who had accused humans of being too violent just a few months earlier. "The Korth Empire is expanding into human territory and our fleets cannot stop them. We need human ships and human fighters." Dr. Roberts received desperate messages from her former colleagues every day. Medical emergencies that human doctors could handle easily were becoming disasters. Research projects that had been joint efforts between species stopped working without human scientists and their strange way of thinking about problems. The most frightening news came from the Veltar intelligence networks. Their long-range sensors had detected massive fleets of unknown ships at the edge of the galaxy. These were not human ships or any design that anyone recognized. Something else was out there, something that had been staying away from Council space for reasons nobody understood. "They kept us safe," Zareth admitted to her private advisors. "For 50 years, humans stood between us and dangers we did not even know existed. We never realized what they were protecting us from." The aliens were finally starting to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Humans had not been the monsters in their galaxy. They had been the guardians. 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy was falling apart. The careful peace that the Galactic Council had maintained for centuries was cracking like ice in the sun. Problems that humans had been quietly solving for decades were now becoming disasters that nobody else knew how to handle. Captain Steve Martinez commanded the last human military ship still patrolling the old galaxy. His mission was to find any humans who might have been left behind and make sure they got to safety. What he saw during his patrols made him understand why. Earth's leaders had decided to leave. The Zarian slavers were back in force. These were cruel aliens who captured people and sold them to work in mines and factories on distant worlds. For 20 years, human patrol ships had kept them away from the trade routes and civilian colonies. Now that the humans were gone, the slavers were everywhere. Martinez watched through his ship's cameras as Zarian raiders attacked a passenger liner carrying families from 3 different species. The ship sent out distress calls, but the nearest Council security force was 6 days away. By the time help arrived, the ship would be empty and the families would be gone forever. "Council security is completely hopeless," Martinez told Admiral Parker during their weekly communication. "They take weeks to respond to emergencies that we handled in hours. The criminals know this, and they are taking advantage of it." The situation was even worse in the Outer Rim territories where humans had maintained bases for decades. The aggressive Korth Empire had begun expanding into former human space, and their war fleets met no resistance. Council forces were too weak and too slow to stop them on the council station. Speaker Zareth was dealing with crisis after crisis. Every day brought new reports of disasters that were getting worse because humans were not there to help. The economic system of the galaxy was collapsing without human traders and engineers. The Altarian agricultural worlds were facing starvation because human cargo ships had stopped delivering food supplies. The Centauri mining colonies could not operate their equipment because human technicians were gone. Even simple things like maintaining space stations and fixing broken communication networks were becoming impossible without human expertise. We never realized how much they did for us, Zareth admitted to her advisors during a private meeting. We only saw the fighting and the explosions. We did not see all the quiet work they did to keep our civilization running. The most frightening discovery came from long-range sensors at the edge of the galaxy. Massive fleets of unknown ships were moving closer to Council space. These vessels did not match any known design, and they did not respond to communication attempts. Intelligence analysts estimated there were hundreds of thousands of them. Counselor Vexhai, who had spent years complaining about human violence, now found himself begging for human military assistance. We need their ships and their soldiers, he told the emergency assembly. Our own forces cannot handle these new threats. Dr. Kelly Roberts was still working at her medical research station, trying to finish her cure for the plague affecting several council worlds. Every day she received desperate messages from alien colleagues who could not solve problems without human help. The Rigelian fever outbreak on Proxima Colony is spreading faster than we can treat it, reported Dr. Voss, a Centauri physician who had worked with human doctors for years. We need human medical teams. Their aggressive treatment methods are the only thing that works against this disease. Roberts shook her head sadly. The human medical ships left with everyone else. I am the only human doctor left in this part of the galaxy, and I cannot be everywhere at once. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the council. Humans had not just been members of their galactic community. They had been the backbone that held everything together. Their shipping companies had moved goods efficiently across thousands of light years. Their doctors had solved medical problems that stumped other species. Their engineers had designed and maintained systems that kept entire worlds running smoothly. Most importantly, their military had kept the peace. Human patrol fleets had prevented wars between aggressive species. Human marines had stopped pirates and slavers from preying on the weak. Human intelligence networks had identified threats before they became serious problems. Admiral Parker received reports about the chaos from her position with the Andromeda fleet. Humanity was now living in massive ship cities in the void between galaxies, preparing for a journey that would take thousands of years. They had the technology and resources to help the Council, but they also remembered how they had been treated. 3. More Council worlds have fallen to the Korth Empire, reported Commander Rachel Ward during a briefing aboard the new Earth ship City. Their expansion fleet is meeting no resistance. Council forces retreat every time they encounter Korth warships. Parker studied the tactical displays showing the collapse of the galaxy they had once called home. Any requests for assistance? From the Council? Dozens, Ward replied. They are offering us everything they can think of. Full voting rights, territorial autonomy, unlimited military expansion permissions. They even offered to make Earth the capital world of the Council. Too late, Parker said quietly. We offered them friendship and they gave us suspicion. We offered protection and they called it aggression. We saved their lives and they called us monsters. The Andromeda project was moving forward on schedule. Huge construction platforms were building the technology needed for humanity's long journey to a new galaxy. Agricultural ships were producing food for millions of people. Industrial facilities were manufacturing everything a civilization needed to survive in deep space. Meanwhile, the galaxy they had left behind was discovering what real monsters looked like. The unknown fleets at the galactic rim had finally revealed themselves as invasion forces from a hostile neighboring galaxy. These beings called themselves the Devourers, and they lived up to their name. the first Council world to encounter the Devourers, was completely destroyed in less than 6 hours. The planet's surface was stripped of all life and resources. The population of 4 billion beings simply vanished. When Council ships arrived to investigate, they found nothing but a dead rock floating in space. The Devourers make human warfare. "Look gentle," reported the Council's military intelligence chief to an emergency session. "They do not take prisoners or negotiate. They consume everything living and move on to the next target." Dr. Roberts received a final communication from Admiral Parker before the human fleet moved too far away for normal radio contact. "You can still come with us, Kelly. We have room for one more person." Roberts looked around her research station at the alien colleagues who depended on her work. "I cannot abandon them now. Someone needs to finish this cure, and I am the only one who knows how." "I understand," Parker replied. "Take care of yourself. You are the last human voice they will hear." As the Andromeda fleet disappeared into the cosmic darkness, the Galactic Council finally understood what they had lost. The species that had united in fear of human aggression were now facing an enemy that made humans look like peaceful negotiators. The beings who had complained about human violence were being consumed by creatures that treated genocide as routine. The Council had thought humans were dangerous because they fought to protect others. Now they faced enemies who fought to destroy everything. They had driven away their guardians and invited in their executioners. 1 year had passed since Ambassador Morrison walked out of the Council chamber, and the aliens were finally beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Every attempt to contact humanity had met with complete silence. The humans seemed to have vanished from the galaxy as if they had never existed at all. Commander Rachel Ward stood in the command center of the ship city New Earth, reading the latest message from Council Speaker Zareth. The communication had traveled for months across the void to reach humanity's new home between galaxies. The message was a formal apology and a desperate plea for help. "They are offering us complete control over our old territory," Ward reported to Admiral Parker during their weekly briefing. "Full voting rights in the Council, unlimited military expansion, recognition of all human territorial claims, and they want to make Earth the new capital of the galactic government." Parker looked at the long list of concessions with no emotion on her face. She had served humanity for 40 years and had seen how the aliens treated her people during all that time. "1 year too late," she said simply. "Phase 3 construction is almost finished. We will be ready for the long journey to Andromeda soon." The Andromeda project represented everything humans had learned about survival and determination. While the Council struggled with the collapse of their civilization, humanity had been building something unprecedented in galactic history. Massive ship cities housed millions of people in completely self-sufficient environments. Industrial platforms manufactured everything needed for a civilization that would spend thousands of years traveling through empty space. Agricultural vessels the size of small moons produced food for the growing population. Research ships continued developing new technologies for the long journey ahead. Construction platforms built new ship cities to house humans who had been born during the Exodus, children who would never see the galaxy their parents had left behind. Meanwhile, that galaxy was learning what happened when humans were not there to protect it. The Korth Empire had consumed 6 Council worlds in 3 months. Their war fleets met no real resistance because Council military forces were designed for peacekeeping, not actual warfare. The aliens had spent so many centuries avoiding conflict that they had forgotten how to fight. The situation became much worse when the Devourers revealed themselves. These beings came from outside the galaxy and had been watching Council space for centuries, waiting for the right moment to attack. That moment came when human patrol fleets disappeared from the galactic rim. The Devourers were afraid of human military power, reported the Council's chief intelligence officer to an emergency assembly. "Our analysis shows they have been planning an invasion for decades, but they never attacked because human fleets patrolled the outer systems. They knew humans would fight back." The first Devourer assault consumed an entire star system in 2 days. 20 billion beings died in the initial attack, and the survivors faced something worse than death. The Devourers did not just kill their enemies. They consumed everything living and turned it into resources for their war machine. Dr. Kelly Roberts watched the tactical reports from her research station and felt sick. She was the only human left in Council space, still working on a cure for the plague that was killing millions of aliens. Every day brought news of another disaster that humans could have prevented. "We trained their military forces," she explained during a subspace call with Admiral Parker. "We shared our weapons technology, our tactical knowledge, our defensive strategies. But we could not teach them the most important thing, the willingness to die fighting for people who hate you." The Council's latest attempt to contact humanity involved sending Ambassador Eli Cooper to the Andromeda fleet. Cooper was a human who had chosen to stay behind and become a Council citizen when the Exodus began. He had been given unprecedented authority to negotiate humanity's return on any terms they wanted. Cooper's ship was detected at the edge of human space and received a brief acknowledgement. Message received. Ambassador Cooper may observe but not interfere with project operations. When Cooper finally reached the ship city New Earth, he found himself looking at humanity's greatest achievement. The massive vessel was like a small planet with cities and forests and oceans all contained within its hull. Millions of people lived and worked there, building a new civilization among the stars. "You could save them all," Cooper pleaded during his meeting with Admiral Parker and the Human Council. "The Devourers are consuming everything in their path. Trillions of innocent beings will die if someone does not stop them." Counselor Janet Price, one of the elected leaders of the human fleet, looked at Cooper with tired eyes. "They made their choice when they decided we were the enemy. For 50 years we bled and died to protect species that saw us as monsters. We offered friendship and received contempt. We gave our lives for their peace and were rewarded with exile." Cooper tried to argue, but the decision had already been made. The Human Council had voted months earlier on what to do if the aliens came begging for help. The vote had been close, but the majority decided that humanity owed nothing to people who had driven them away. "We could fight the Devourers," admitted Admiral Parker. "Our technology is advanced enough and our military is strong enough. But how many humans would die protecting aliens who celebrated when we left? How many of our children would never see Andromeda because we chose to save people who called us barbarians?" The irony was not lost on anyone present. The Galactic Council had spent decades complaining about human aggression and violence. They had accused humans of being warlike and dangerous. Now they faced an enemy that embodied everything they had wrongly believed about humanity, and their peaceful civilization was helpless against it. Reports from the dying galaxy painted a picture of complete collapse. The proud Veltar homeworld had fallen after a siege lasting less than 6 hours. The beautiful crystal cities of the Etherian Collective were being harvested for raw materials. The advanced Rigelian Federation had been reduced to scattered refugee fleets running for their lives. 17 more worlds lost this week, reported Commander Ward from the Communications Center. The Devourer advance is accelerating. They are consuming Council space faster than our intelligence networks can track. Some Council refugees had managed to escape the carnage and were fleeing toward the last known human positions. Thousands of alien ships filled with desperate survivors were begging for asylum in human space. They carried the scattered remains of species that had once looked down on humanity as crude and violent. "They want us to protect them now," observed Counselor Price during a Human Council meeting. "The same beings who accused us of being too aggressive are running to us for safety." The Human Council spent days debating what to do about the refugees. Some members argued that humanity should help because it was the right thing to do. Others pointed out that these were the same aliens who had driven humans away and celebrated their departure. "We have the resources to save them," said Counselor Alan Brooks, who supported helping the refugees. "Our ship cities can accommodate millions more people. We have the technology to protect them during the journey to Andromeda." "And what happens when we reach the new galaxy?" countered Counselor Price. "Do we trust them to remember our help, or will they turn on us again the moment they feel safe?" Admiral Parker listened to the arguments, but her mind was already made up. She had seen too much hatred and prejudice from the aliens to believe they would ever truly change. "We will provide emergency medical aid and basic supplies," she decided. "But they cannot join our fleet. They made their choice 50 years ago when they decided humans were the problem." As the last human ship prepared to leave the local group of galaxies forever, the Devourers were consuming what remained of Council civilization. The species that had driven away their protectors were learning too late the difference between guardians and conquerors, between protection and oppression. 2 years after Ambassador Morrison had walked out of the Council chamber, the Galactic Council was facing its darkest hour. The Devourer invasion had consumed more than half of Council space, and their advance showed no signs of slowing down. Every attempt at negotiation had failed because the Devourers did not negotiate. They only consumed. General Lisa Brooks stood in the command center of the ship city New Earth, watching displays that showed the galaxy humanity had abandoned. The Devourer fleet numbered in the hundreds of thousands of vessels, each one larger and more powerful than anything the Council could build. Their technology was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, and they used it for only one purpose: total destruction. "Final phase starts in 72 hours, announced Chief Engineer Paul Anderson from his station. "All ship cities are ready for the long journey. The Andromeda Galaxy is waiting for us." Humanity was about to take the final step in their exodus. The massive fleet of ship cities that housed Earth's entire population was preparing to leave the local group of galaxies entirely. They would travel for 3,000 years through the empty void between galaxies, and their distant descendants would be the first humans to see their new home. The technology that made such a journey possible had been developed in secret for decades. While the Council dismissed human achievements as crude and barbaric, Earth scientists had been quietly solving problems that other species thought were impossible. Faster-than-light travel, self-sustaining ecosystems, artificial gravity, and life extension technology, humans had mastered them all. Ambassador Cooper found himself witnessing humanity's greatest engineering achievement. The ship cities were marvels that defied imagination, completely self-sufficient worlds capable of supporting millions of people for thousands of years. Cities with parks and schools floated next to industrial complexes and research laboratories. Artificial suns provided light and energy while massive hydroponics bays grew food for the population. "You still have time to save them," Cooper pleaded during his final audience with Admiral Parker and the Human Council. "The Devourers will consume everything. Trillions of beings will die horrible deaths. You have the power to stop this." The Human Council had been elected by the people of the ship cities to guide humanity through its greatest crisis. These men and women carried the weight of their entire species on their shoulders, and they had to make decisions that would affect humans for thousands of years to come. Counselor Janet Price spoke for many when she replied to Cooper's plea. "They made their choice long before the Devourers arrived. For 50 years we protected them from threats they did not even know existed. We saved their lives countless times and asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. Instead, they called us monsters and drove us away." The irony was bitter and complete. The Galactic Council had spent decades complaining about human aggression and militarism, never understanding that human strength was the only thing standing between them and real monsters. Now they faced an enemy that made human warfare look like a friendly disagreement between children. Reports from the dying galaxy were almost too horrible to believe. The Devourers did not just conquer worlds, they stripped them of all life and resources before moving on. Entire species were being erased from existence in a matter of hours. Planets that had been home to billions of beings were left as empty rocks floating in space. "The Veltar homeworld is gone," reported Commander Ward from the Communications Center. 4 billion people consumed in 6 hours. The Etherian crystal cities have been harvested for raw materials. The Rigelian Federation exists only as refugee fleets scattered across dead systems. Admiral Parker studied the tactical displays with the eye of someone who had spent her life preparing for war. She could see patterns in the Devourer advance that revealed their strategy and weaknesses. Human military doctrine could counter their tactics. Human technology could match their weapons, and human determination could outlast their aggression. We could win, she admitted during a private meeting with the Human Council. It would cost us dearly, but we have the resources and knowledge to defeat the Devourers. The question is whether we should sacrifice human lives to save people who celebrated our departure. The debate that followed was the most important in human history. Some council members argued that humanity had a moral duty to help because they were the only ones who could. Others pointed out that the aliens had made their feelings about humans very clear, and there was no reason to believe they would be grateful for rescue. How many of our children will never see Andromeda because we chose to fight someone else's war? Asked Counselor Brooks during the discussion. How many human families will be destroyed saving aliens who think we are barbarians? But if we do nothing, we become the monsters they always said we were, argued Counselor Martinez. Can we really watch trillions of innocent beings die when we have the power to save them? The vote was scheduled for the next day, but everyone knew what the result would be. The human population of the ship cities had been polled, and 67% opposed any military intervention in the old galaxy. They had not forgotten the decades of insults and accusations. They remembered being called violent and aggressive for protecting the weak. They remembered being treated as outcasts and threats by the very people they had died to defend. Dr. Kelly Roberts received a final message from the Andromeda fleet before they moved beyond communication range. Admiral Parker's face appeared on her screen, looking older and more tired than Roberts remembered. "Last chance, Kelly," Parker said simply. "We have room for one more person if you want to come with us." Roberts looked around her research station at the alien colleagues who depended on her work. They were trying to develop treatments for the biological weapons the Devourers used to destroy populations before harvesting their worlds. Without her expertise, millions more would die in agony. "I cannot abandon them now," Roberts replied. "Someone has to finish this work, and I am the only human left who knows how." Parker nodded with understanding and respect. "Take care of yourself. You are the last human voice they will hear." The Human Council's final vote was closer than expected, but the result was inevitable. 47% voted to help the Council, but 53% chose to continue the journey to Andromeda. Humanity would not return to save the people who had driven them away. "We could save them all," Admiral Parker announced to the assembled representatives. "But we would lose thousands of our own people in the process. We would delay our journey to Andromeda by decades, and there is no guarantee that the aliens would treat us any better after we saved them than they did before." The decision was made not from cruelty or revenge, but from simple human practicality. The species that had accused humans of being monsters were about to learn what real monsters look like. The beings who had complained about human violence were facing an enemy that made human warfare seem gentle and civilized. As the ship cities began their final acceleration toward the void between galaxies, the last human signals from the old galaxy painted a picture of complete collapse. The Galactic Council had ceased to exist as an effective government. Member worlds were falling to the Devourers at an increasing rate. The proud civilization that had driven away its protectors was being consumed by the very threats those protectors had held at bay. Humanity was leaving forever, taking their strength and their compassion to a new galaxy where maybe they would be appreciated for what they truly were, not monsters, but guardians willing to fight and die for people who could not protect themselves. 3 years had passed since Ambassador Morrison walked out of the council chamber for the last time. The final human ship was now leaving the local group of galaxies forever, carrying with it the last witnesses to the fall of the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. Captain Tony Williams commanded the ship Last Watch, humanity's final vessel to depart from their old home. His mission was to maintain a monitoring station at the very edge of local group space, recording the final chapter of the Galactic Council for humanity's historical records. The ship was small compared to the massive city ships that carried most of humanity toward Andromeda. but it was equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication equipment human science could build. Williams and his crew of 50 volunteers had chosen to stay behind longer than anyone else to document what happened to the civilization that had rejected them. Total population loss now estimated at 98%, Williams reported through quantum communication to the Andromeda fleet. Survivors number in the hundreds of millions, scattered across dead systems with no central government or coordination. The Devourer fleet is moving beyond the galactic rim, following our trajectory toward the void. The irony was complete and terrible. The Galactic Council had driven away their protectors in the name of peace, only to be destroyed by threats that made human warfare look like a children's game. The species that had criticized human militarism were extinct, while humanity thrived in the darkness between galaxies. Admiral Parker received Williams' final reports aboard the ship City New Earth as the Andromeda fleet continued its journey into the cosmic deep. She was old now, her hair gray and her face lined with the weight of leading humanity through its greatest crisis. But her eyes were still sharp as she studied the tactical data from the dead galaxy. The Devourers consumed the last Council stronghold yesterday, she announced to the assembled leaders of the human fleet. The Centauri core worlds fell after a siege lasting 18 hours. The species that united in fear of human aggression have been destroyed by an enemy that makes our worst actions look merciful. Dr. Kelly Roberts had remained at her research station until the very end, working desperately to find treatments for the biological weapons the Devourers used against their victims. She had saved millions of lives with her medical research, but it was not enough to stop the tide of destruction sweeping across the galaxy. Her final transmission reached the last watch just before the Devourers arrived at her station. "I have completed the antidote synthesis for the neural toxin," she reported in a calm voice as explosions echoed in the background. "The formula is being transmitted to all remaining medical facilities. Perhaps some will survive long enough to use it." The transmission ended in static, and Dr. Kelly Roberts became the last human to die in the old galaxy. She had stayed behind to help people who had never appreciated her species, and she had given her life trying to save them from an enemy they could not defeat. Williams watched through his ship's sensors as the research station was consumed by Devourer forces. The aliens who had worked alongside Roberts for years were dead within minutes, their bodies converted into resources for the invasion fleet that was now spreading beyond the galaxy's borders. "They kept us safe for 50 years, Williams said quietly to his crew as they watched the final destruction of Council space. Humans died protecting aliens who saw them as monsters. They bled for people who accused them of being too violent. In the end, when real monsters came, there were no humans left to stand against them." The last watch finally departed local group space as the Devourer fleet began its own exodus. The invaders had consumed everything of value in the galaxy and were now moving on to find new targets. Their destination appeared to be the same void between galaxies where humanity was traveling, setting up a confrontation that might not happen for thousands of years. Meanwhile, the Andromeda project continued its incredible journey. The ship cities had become a complete civilization in motion, with children born among the stars who would never see the galaxy their parents had abandoned. These new humans learned the story of the old galaxy from their elders, and they understood the lessons it taught. "They called us monsters," Admiral Parker would tell the young officers who served under her. "They feared our strength and our willingness to fight. They never understood that we fought to protect what we loved, not to destroy what we hated. When real monsters came for them, they finally learned the difference." The Human Council established the Archive of the Lost, a vast digital library that preserved the history, culture, and achievements of every species that had existed in the local group. It was humanity's final gift to the civilization that had rejected them, a chance at immortality and memory, if not in flesh. Children growing up on the ship cities learned about the Veltar and their proud warrior traditions. They studied Etherean philosophy and Rajalian mathematics. They read the poetry of species whose names were now spoken only by humans traveling through the void. The cultures that had feared human barbarism were kept alive by the very people they had called monsters. As decades passed and the Andromeda fleet traveled deeper into the cosmic wilderness, the old galaxy became a distant memory preserved in archives and stories. But the lessons it taught shaped human civilization for generations to come. Never again became the motto of human military forces. Never again will we protect those who see protection as oppression. Never again will we save those who consider their saviors to be their greatest enemies. The species that had formed the Galactic Council had learned too late that peace was not the absence of conflict, it was the presence of those willing to fight for it. They had discovered that there was a difference between guardians and conquerors, between protection and aggression, between necessary violence and meaningless destruction, but they learned these lessons as they died, consumed by an enemy that embodied everything they had wrongly believed about humanity. The Devourers showed them what real monsters looked like, what actual aggression meant, what true violence could accomplish. In the end, humanity's silent departure had not been an act of revenge or cruelty. It had been the natural result of an impossible situation. You cannot protect people who see your protection as a threat, and you cannot save those who view their rescuers as their enemies. The Galactic Council's legacy would be preserved in human archives as a warning to future generations. It was the story of a civilization that chose comfortable prejudice over uncomfortable allies, and paid the ultimate price for their decision. As the ship cities of humanity disappeared into the cosmic deep, they left behind a galaxy full of silence, and a lesson written in the ashes of a billion worlds. The species that had feared human strength were gone. Destroyed by forces that made human power look gentle and restrained, the humans departed silently, leaving the council full of regret. That would echo through empty space until the last star burned out and the universe itself grew cold and dark.